So today I'm gonna talk to you guys about an alternative way to think about organizational structure. We believe that if you focus organization structure on the individual's experience as opposed to hierarchy and a rigid structure come to it, we'll get high engagement from individuals and ultimately high engagement from a company. I want to talk today about where hierarchy come from. How do we find ourselves in a situation where the book even on the shelf in the first place? I'm going to talk about why we believe hierarchy is fundamentally broken, and we're going to talk about how we about implementing a different structure that's worked well for us. So first, let's look at where hierarchy come from, why so many companies operate this. If you go back to the 20th century, a lot of our large companies of the day, they make things. The jobs people did were highly mechanical. Material that would come into the end of the building and stamp some metal and pop some rivets and ship it out to the other end. And the tasks were largely repeatable. The other thing was true about 20th century is that organization was the communication had a very high cost to it. If I wanted to communicate out to 1,000 people who work for me, I needed a way to cascade that communication to various levels of management and get it down to the people who actually did the work. But now we fast forward to the 21st century through automation, through outsourcing. The types of jobs that we do in a large organizations are largely creative, not mechanical. The other thing that's changed is communication. The cost of communication has gone virtually to zero. And we have thick tools like email, like Slack, like video broadcast that allows people in organizations to be en masse communicate with thousands of people really efficiently. So the environment in which we all work in the 21st century has evolved, but we're still stuck in the 20th century in terms of how we think about organization structure. So when we talk about the individual experience, let's unpack that a little bit. Let's figure out what we mean. I go back to the conversations where we started having internally around the time that we decided hierarchy wasn't for us. And one of the things that we started to hear as we had this conversation was that to get people to a point where they're most engaged, they wanted to work on a business need. It was best aligned to something they're passionate about and something they're good at. So passion, skill, and need. In all different conversations we're having, that was common thing that was coming up, and the more research it is that it was necessary an idea that unique to us. There's a guy named Dan Ping who gives a great talk about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which we believe are just different words for passion, skill, and need. And there's a real science around getting people to that sweet spot where they can work on the things that link to the passion, skill, need, and the engagement level. So that was great. That told us a little bit about individuals. But in order to think about organizational structure, we had to look at leadership. So let's take this. The business need of leadership. Well, we start having the same conversations. What do you guys expect from your leaders? Hey leader, what are the things what the jobs are? And the three things that come up in this conversation is that the idea that we expect our leaders to turn vision into strategy, expect our leader to execute a plan, and we expect our leaders to coach and mentor and have empathy. So that's great. We now can say, okay, well, the business need of leadership are those three things. But now let's apply this idea of the individual and their skills and their passions. And what we found was, and I'll take myself as an example, what we found was that on these three dimensions that we expect all leaders to do, everyone who's a leader has one of these that they were just born with. So in my case, turning vision to strategy, I love doing it. I'm super passionate about it. It's been my life purpose since I was 12 years old, trying to build a mouse empire. Leaders generally have learned a second one. They got into leadership, they're passionate about being leaders, they want to get better at it. So in my case, coaching, mentoring, empathy, I learned to say good morning to people, learn to say thank you. But I had to think about that, and it's a skill I've developed over time. On the third one, usually leaders have one of these dimensions that they have the blind spot for, they're not passionate about, they've never been good at, for me is execution. You don't trust me to execute a plan. So I want just to kind of stop and really drive this point home, because these two concepts drive the rest of my talk. So we have this individual model, passion, skill, need that drives people to be most engaged and the most productive. Then we have this leader model, where we expect leaders to drive strategy, execute plan, and have empathy for people they work with. So let's watch what's happened when we put these two concepts into high gear. So there's me, driving vision, saying thank you, being horrible at execution. So what do? Well, do something logical. I hire people around me who are good at execution. But the problem is, but by the very nature of this model, we're good at execution. They're not good at something else. Maybe they're not good at saying, maybe they're not good at communicating strategy. And as you build those, what happens is this dilution of those three things. By the time you get to the bottom of the pyramid, no one knows what the strategy is. There's execution going on all directions, and no one feels valued. And there's the leaders of the organization. So now people who work for those leaders are confused. They don't feel valued, and they ultimately disengaged, and they don't want to work there. And that's what we had experienced. So we went to this exercise. We sort of unpacked, being engineer, we did a root cause analysis, and we figured out that this was what's going on in organization. So the insight that we took away from this was this idea of functionalizing a leader. So we don't have managers anymore. We have three functions that do the things that a manager used to be responsible. We still have this individual, but now each individual has these three functions of leaderships that they interact with. It's supposed to push and pull and help them get to that sweet part where they can be most engaged and most productive.